Hello folks, welcome back. This is Chris in Central Pennsylvania. As we sit here tonight, a war is unfolding, the war for South Africa. And like most wars, the first casualty is the truth. The constant barrage of propaganda and lies emanating from South African politicians, university professors and academia, and especially the media and social media is shocking to say the very least. But a very real and genuine war is unfolding on the ground in South Africa. Fortunately, to date, it hasn't resulted in armed violence, but can we rule that out? Let's hope so.
Welcome back once again. This is Chris Report, and he assured me that since I'm in town in Boulders, folks, this is Chris Wyatt reporting from South Africa.
The war for South Africa. Acting as if it is still ruling, the African National Congress makes unilateral decisions like the foolish idea last November to send America-hating Ibrahim Rasool back to Washington, and we see how that went. Now being greeted like a hero by a bizarre crowd of sycophants that show up at the airport to greet this man back who violated all norms of diplomatic protocol in the most shocking manner one can imagine. One can only suspect this was intentional to provoke the United States into taking action against South Africa. To what end, we still wonder. The constant lies coming out of Pretoria that the unconstitutional Expropriation Without Compensation Act was necessary to balance the scales of past are no longer even at the forefront of the propaganda war. That has fallen by the wayside. First, Trump was mistaken. Then, well, it's necessary. But now we're not even seeing those arguments. Now, unfolding across South Africa, we are simply seeing a state apparatus sitting on the sidelines while accusations that police are involved in at least the Fort Jackson land thefts unfolds. It started in Seshego in Limpopo province in February when thieves staked out land that they claimed, stating clearly that Ramaphosa had authorized the land grabs by signing the Expropriation Without Compensation Act.
So the community members took it upon themselves to come here to invade this land, to build shacks, and also to demarcate stands for themselves. Saying that they are going to continue to expropriate this land without compensation. They're saying that they are going to invade each and every land around Seshego.
Ironically, South Africa has no need whatsoever for expropriation without compensation. This is just theft. The Constitution already guarantees the state can expropriate property in the public interest as long as they pay someone for it. What is the big deal about paying people for land? The narrative has shifted to the land was stolen. Well, that's total crock of manure. Show me land that doesn't have legitimate title deed to it. Making broad claims for 43 million people that didn't exist on this planet from a century ago is ludicrous to say the least. South Africa's population was just around 5 million when the country came into existence. Those 5 million people didn't own or occupy all the space that people are claiming now. That's utter nonsense. Now, historically, the African National Congress has largely respected private property rights since they've ascended to power back in 1994. But that was an African National Congress comfortably in charge of governance, well north of the 50% they needed in Parliament, not the wounded striking out at anything 40% shell of a party that we see today. Ladies and gentlemen, despite the lies and the media non-coverage, land is being confiscated all over South Africa. South African media are largely negligent in reporting this phenomenon, and South African politicians are also complicit in this, from all parties. Land is being confiscated in Limpopo, Seshego, in Northwest Province, and in the Eastern Cape, before Jackson and near East London. And this time, we see inaction from the authorities as lives are destroyed overnight, legal, lawful landowners robbed and bankrupted simply because nature denied them sufficient skin pigmentation to satisfy the racist agenda driving South African politics. Europe is complicit in this by promising billions in funding guarantees. The United Nations is complicit, silent on the human rights abuses now unfolding. The African Union is complicit, and the world is largely silent. Even President Trump, falsely maligned by racist politicians and former ambassadors, is entirely silent on the Zimbabwe 2.0 situation now beginning to unfold in South Africa. This will not end well for South Africa. The failed macroeconomic and political policies promulgated by the African National Congress over the past 15 years were sad and extremely destructive. But what we are seeing playing out now will be far worse. You can kiss foreign direct investment goodbye. You can announce big deals from Google and Microsoft, but they don't build factories. They don't invest capital into infrastructure. They simply occupy buildings they rent that someone in South Africa builds, and they put their data centers there, and they can leave in a heartbeat. you can kiss foreign direct investment goodbye. It was already too much to ask most companies to sink money into an unproductive market with low workforce productivity, paying for your own private security, supplying your own electricity and water, while dealing with rampant crime and negotiating bizarre equity and labor laws. It's simply too much for foreign investors. Add to this the loss of South Africa's most important trading partner. Dark days are ahead. And who's going to suffer from all this, folks? Who will pay the price of all this? Well, South Africans, of course, but especially black South Africans. They will be the ones who suffer from the lack of foreign direct investment. They will be the ones that suffer from the demise of the farming sector in South Africa. Now, bear in mind, folks, that the farming sector in Zimbabwe employed just 4,300 commercial farmers with about 600,000 farm workers out of a country at the time of about 12 million people when this began unfolding in the year 2000. So a small portion of the population. But that farming sector of 4,300 commercial farmers bought tractors. The tractors were largely produced in Zimbabwe. The tires, the components were produced there. So you had this integration that spread out from the bottom of farmer buying a tractor, much of it being produced in Zimbabwe, employing more people who buy things, employ more people, and it ripples out. Then the banks loan money, and the whole thing builds on itself. By destroying the farming sector, Zimbabwe eliminated much of its foreign currency earnings. At the same time, they undermined property rights and destroyed the lives of millions of Zimbabweans, especially black Zimbabweans. What's unfolding now is complete propaganda and lies about the situation. Now, I'll get the hate wankers that will come on my program and say, I don't know the history, I don't know this and all that, but you're full of it. I do know it. You can't sit here and claim something that was yours 5,000 years ago because you didn't exist 5,000 years ago. And this concept of generational trauma is bullshit as well. Grow up, put on your big boy pants, and live in the real world. The irony is that hearing South African politicians claim that Israel doesn't belong in Israel, it's illegitimate, when the Israelis' argument is that they were there 5,000 years ago before they were expelled by the Romans during their day, and they are the original inhabitants of the region. The South Africans are unwilling to recognize that in the ANC and in other parties, while at the same time unwilling to recognize the Khoi and San claims to South Africa and fail to admit the reality that the Nguni-speaking peoples and the Bantu tribes moving down the Great Rift Valley, crossing the Zambezi and Limpopo, are the invaders, along with Europeans who came about a millennia later. They're all invaders. It's the nature of human history. That's what humans do. They move from place to place. They settle. They introduce new political systems, new social systems, and they colonize peoples, and they absorb peoples, or they defeat peoples. That's the nature of human history. South Africa can have a country going forward that is a lawful country, or it can have total chaos. Can you imagine the coming destruction of South Africa? It's already an economy that's not even growing. It's getting smaller by the year. It's contracting. Growing at 0.8% GDP means it's a real loss in terms of losing to inflation. South Africa's economy is shrinking. Its human capital, black, white, and brown, is fleeing to Canary Wharf, to Canada, to New Zealand, to Australia, to the United States, even to France and Japan, those who work in the power industry. This is a country in retreat, and this is sad. This is entirely preventable. The country had such a great opportunity, great goodwill from the entire planet. The world looked the other way for 30 years while the ANC did what it wanted, and now it's a disaster. So what will you do? South Africans, you have no one to blame but yourself. No one to blame but yourself. Whites who don't vote, blacks who vote for the ANC, Indians who feel powerless and don't vote, coloreds who often don't vote, those of you who sat on the sidelines. And I don't want to hear, I voted. Well, did you vote? Really? 43 million eligible voters in 2024. And only about 17 million if you bothered to vote. That's insane. Absolutely insane. You get what you pay for. And in this case, don't pay for. And what you're getting now is a government hell-bent on perpetrating and propagating a myth about land and lying about land and distorting it on a racial basis. And South Africans will suffer immensely. The lies being spread to a new generation of South Africans who have no idea of history and sit around and confidently lie about history, saying this was that and this was that. Total nonsense. It's sad. It's truly sad to see. This Marxist revolutionary nonsense for people who run the government. Who are they trying to overthrow? Themselves? Well, keep it up and you'll go down with the ship. The ANC will wind up being a very, very, very unfortunate tale at the rate they're going. So you can either get control of your cadres and start acting like adults and restore the rule of law and restore people's property rights to them, and then continue purchasing land the way you have been, but work with farmers and farming organizations to help aspiring new farmers who want to farm, be productive, and be successful with training, grants, seed, farm equipment. And at the same time, right now, today, I call on the South African government to issue full title deed to the occupants of RDP houses, the current occupants. Give them the land. Give them the land. Stop lying to South Africa. Stop lying to the world. You are retaining what is essentially dead capital, tens of billions of dollars of dead capital, collateral that no one can use because it's tied up in the hands of politicians so you can keep South Africans, especially poor black South Africans, dependent on the state. Stop it. Issue the title deed. Case closed. What say you, South Africa? For the hate wankers, I know your comments are coming. We know how it works here. You have the inability to think cogently. You have the inability to look beyond someone's skin color. And that's because, well, you're a racist. And that's what racists do. That's what bigots do. So, if you want to have a cogent conversation, feel free to leave a comment. Otherwise, foot sec. Only adults are allowed in the room. Cheers, folks.